Welcome to Model Steam Engines and Boilers. This one is part 52. Making the wooden mounting plinth, painting the wooden block and planking the baseboard. This series, called How to Build a Model Steam Engine, is for my Patreon supporters only. The full-length versions of the episodes in the series contain a lot more information than you're about to see, but this is sufficient to give you a good idea how to do the job. Why is it a good idea to join Patreon? Firstly, you get to see the videos a few months before everyone else. You can download my ebook, and you can watch the entire series of How to Build a Model Steam Launch, which is over 5 hours of instructions. I would like to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters. I could not make these videos without your kind help and support. Here's a clip from the previous episode showing how I coated the top part of this piece of wood with some JB Weld to seal the open grain of the wood. And now, 24 hours later, the JB Weld 2-pack epoxy resin mix is now solid on top of the piece of wood. Unfortunately, this old piece of plywood that I was going to use for the base is very badly warped, for no other reason that at some stage in its life it got wet. So I'm going to use some MDF, and this will be fine, provided the MDF doesn't warp, which I don't think it's going to. The JB Weld on the top surface of the block of wood has now cured, and by using my bench-mounted belt sander and an orbital sander, I cleaned off most of the JB Weld on the top, and now, with the exception of a slight mark that you can see in this clip, the top surface of the wood is fully sealed. What I'm doing now is spraying the piece of wood with a generous coating of grey primer. Once this grey primer has gone hard, and it'll take a couple of days for this to happen, I will rub it down. Then I will apply some cellulose putty to fill in the imperfections and give it another coat of grey primer and another rub down. I can't do anything more with the block of wood until the primer has fully dried. Now it's back into the inner part of the workshop to apply the cyanoacrylate adhesive to the piece of MDF and start the planking process. There's nothing new here that you haven't seen before in other videos. As you can clearly see, I'm applying a generous coating of cyanoacrylate adhesive, also known as super glue or CA glue, to the piece of MDF. And before firmly clamping the plank to the board, I move it around a little bit to distribute the cyanoacrylate adhesive. Then I use a few spring clamps to firmly hold the plank to the board. It's very important that every one of these planks is firmly stuck to the piece of MDF. No sooner had I glued the first plank in position, I continued to stick the second one in place. At this stage it's an easy job just to move the clamps further forward, and as a belt and braces approach, I've also added some larger clamps, because I need to keep the gaps between the planks at an absolute minimum. Here's plank number 3 about to go in place. Same principle on every one, plenty of cyanoacrylate adhesive, followed by clamping the piece of wood in place. For the rest of the planking though, these clamps are not long enough to hold them in place, so I have to put plan B into operation. I'm using a steel rule to extend the clamping range, but this is not ideal. From now on, I need to use another method. I clamp the planks at each end, and for the centre part, I sit quite a lot of weight on the steel rule. This holds the planks flat to the board and stops them from moving. After planking half of the board, the next day I'm back in the workshop to do the other half. But first, has the board warped? No, everything's fine, and the set square makes a really annoying noise as I slide it on the wood. And it wouldn't make this noise if the board was warped, but because it's perfectly flat, that's why the set square makes that horrible noise. The next part of the job is very straightforward, more of the same. I carry on from where I left off, but this time I've turned the board around, so I'm working towards myself. You may have noticed that the video is running at a much higher speed. That's just to get through the job in a reasonable time. To be honest, this job is a bit boring and tedious. But I say to everyone, if you start to get fed up of doing a job, stop doing it, do something else, and then come back to it with renewed enthusiasm. Just like the first plank, With the last plank I fit plenty of spring clamps. When I first laid the planks out on this piece of MDF, I thought they were going to be exactly the same size as the board, but because they're pressed tightly together, I notice that the board is slightly larger. This really doesn't matter because once the adhesive has set, I will remove the surplus on my belt sander before I put the edging on. Once this baseboard is fully planked, I will be painting it underneath to waterproof it, and then I will use an orbital sander on the top surface and around the edge to make it very smooth. These mahogany planks are quite thick and they're not all the same thickness. I'm going to wait until the weather improves before sanding this board so I can do it outside. Stay safe, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.